but its story actually starts in 1990. We used to play Dungeons and Dragons in John Carmack's campaign, and there was this group in there called the Silver Shadow Band that did work for a group called Justice. So in the Silver Shadow Band, there was this super badass named Quake that had an incredible Thor-like hammer. He's someone that you would almost never see because he's so high level, and our group was made up of just low-level peons. We're basically lucky to even see him and go on an awesome adventure with him once or twice. So needless to say, we wanted to make a game with Quake in it, especially if we could play as Quake. So we were finishing up our first King trilogy, and we decided after Commander King, we wanted to make Quake next. So in the preview section of Marooned on Mars, the shareware episode that we put out, we hyped up the idea for our next game, which is called Quake, The Fight for Justice. So we worked on the prototype for a couple of weeks in January 1991, and it just was not what we were thinking. The tech wasn't there yet. So we decided to put it on ice. Someday we will make Quake. So it reminds me of the start of Pixar, how all the ideas for all of their movies came out of one meeting at the very start of that company. So we continued working on Dangerous Dave and the Haunted Mansion to return to Quake later. So we released Wolfenstein 3D, Spear of Destiny, Doom, Doom 2, Heretic, Hexen. Carmack was planning on making his next engine true 3D, thank God. So we decided that it was time to make Quake finally. It was only 4 years after the prototype, but in that time, we had made 15 games, an engine upgrade to Wolfenstein 3D for Raven Software's Shadowcaster. We played around with Atari Lynx development for Wolfenstein 3D, and Atari even wanted us to create their mascot character named Pounce. And we made the Super Nintendo version of Wolfenstein 3D. And this was with a team of only 6 people. The Archvile standing in for Tom Hall, who wasn't there during this picture. So the original ideas behind Quake were starting to develop at the end of 1994. We didn't have a cohesive vision of the game or how it would play. It's a big echo, huh? All right, so we did not immediately assume that it would be a shooter. What we had was the knowledge that we would be creating a true 3D world for gameplay to take place in. So what we had, so we started to form the ideas for this. Our game design ideas began with Quake the character, and he had a huge and powerful hammer. He could throw that hammer and destroy buildings, at least in the D&D universe. Quake came from a medieval time period, so we already knew that the game would take place in the past. We talked about how the camera could move. One incredible scene that would be possible is that you could sneak up behind someone in multiplayer mode who's standing at the edge of a hill and basically just slam their head in with a hammer right in the back of their skull, and they would tumble down the mountain and see the world rotate forwards as opposed to the left and right rotation that players are used to with the mouse. We never got that working, but the idea was there just in case we wanted to have that kind of gameplay. The first part of starting work on the engine was establishing the priorities. A client-server architecture was just as important as the engine being true 3D. So we were not going to be faking it like the Doom era technology. This time it was going to be real, and it had to be real fast. To do that, we were going to be using the FPU for the first time to speed up 3D calculations, since most processors at that time had them built in. We were developing on Intel Pentium chips around 90 megahertz with 8 megabytes of RAM. We were still targeting DOS as the gaming operating system to play it on. And we were developing the game on the Next Step workstation. Before making levels, we needed a level editor that could create 3D maps. And before we could write a 3D level editor, we needed to define the structure of the world and how it would be represented. So this was John Carmack's new engine design, and it was going to be based on an element that he called brushes. A brush could be any shape, but in the editor it would start as a rectangular volume. Special cutting tools could shave off edges so slopes could be made, but those tools cut at an infinite distance. So creating interesting shapes required several brushes individually sliced and pieced together. An example of this is the first door you see when you come down the ramp from the initial slipgate. It's a high-tech door that has a notch on one side and the other side has a bump on it, and they fit perfectly together. To create this door required 3 pieces on one side and 2 pieces on the other side. So the editor was called Quake, and it had a unique way of making levels, because creating a true 3D editor would be like creating today's Maya or 3D Studio Max from scratch, and it would take a long time. So we went with a very simplistic editor that showed levels from the top down, and a side view that showed the brushes that were under a special marker, like an X, that we placed whenever we wanted to adjust the vertical height of brushes. So we could drag the brushes in the view up and down and see the result in a small 3D rendered view in the top left corner. So because of this way of viewing and creating levels, it took more work to make simple things like a ramp, like the ramp you walk down when you come through the slipgate. You may be thinking that this way of editing levels would be incredibly difficult and insane, and you'd be right. For example, that base door that I drew, for the base door, I drew it in 2D, and then I had to rotate it so then it was vertical. Then I could rotate it and move it into place using the side view and the marker. That's for every single thing. This process happened for every single brush in every level. It was extremely labor intensive, but the team was making levels instead of waiting for some giant 3D level design tool to be created. So here's some sketches I made before starting on the first Quake map, which was E1M1. And final map, the first map basically had that shape.